Okay, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to unpack a pretty big theory from our source material. This idea that our entire global financial system is on the verge of a massive fundamental reevaluation. The term the source uses for it is the Great Repricing.
And really, it all boils down to this one provocative question. Is the financial system that we all rely on every single day actually broken? Well, the analysis we're digging into today argues that the answer is a big, resounding yes. And we're about to get into exactly why and what that might mean for your ability to save and build wealth.
So what is the Great Repricing anyway? Well, the way the source puts it, it's this inevitable moment when every single asset, we're talking your house, your stocks, literally everything, has to get repriced against a totally new, neutral kind of money. The whole argument is that the dollar-based system we're all living in has just become unsustainable, and that's going to force a huge, huge economic shift.
So, how in the world did we get here? The argument starts with this really core problem. When a system can't generate real economic growth, real productivity, it doesn't just stop. Instead, it starts to print stories, narratives, to mask what's really going on.
And this quote right here, it just nails the whole idea. The thinking is, instead of making real stuff or producing actual value, the system has just gotten really, really good at producing convincing stories to keep everyone's confidence up. And let's look at a prime example of this that the source points out.
So the official story that came out was this massive economic win, a record-breaking budget surplus for the US government in September. On the surface, that sounds incredible, right? A sign of a super healthy economy. But is that what was really happening?
And this is where the analysis says, hang on a second, we need to ask a really important question. How exactly did they get to this record surplus? This is where you have to look past the headlines and dig into the actual numbers.
And this is where it gets kinda wild. The source claims this whole surplus was basically manufactured using what it calls accounting gimmicks. I mean, we're talking about a mysterious $107 billion line item called a negative spend, a term that, by the way, doesn't really exist in normal accounting. Then you have interest payments on $37 trillion of debt that were just suspiciously low. And major payments for things like Medicare and veterans benefits were suddenly half of what they were expected to be, just for that month. So the argument is, this wasn't real prosperity. It was just a story, a very carefully crafted one.
Now, this whole battle between the story and the reality, it's not just happening at home. According to the source, it's a full-blown drama playing out on the world stage, especially when you look at the economic rivalry between the US and China. So on one side, you have the public story, right? The US projecting strength, threatening these massive tariffs on China. But the analysis we're looking at says, nope, that's a bluff. And why? Because the real economic power, the real leverage, control over manufacturing, over essential rare earth minerals, that lies with China.
And what's really fascinating is how the source frames the US response here. They frame it like the classic stages of grief. It's a pretty wild way to look at geopolitics, but check it out. It starts with denial. Oh, we can just cut our way out of debt, it'll be fine. Then comes anger. It's China's fault, they're undermining us. That leads to bargaining, trying to cut a deal. The source predicts this will eventually lead to a depression phase, just printing more money, before finally acceptance, realizing we have to innovate with new technology.
So all of this brings us to the alternative that the source puts forward, the tool that they claim can slice right through all these narratives and show us what's really happening. The analysis positions Bitcoin not just as some kind of digital money, but as a truth machine.
You know, one of the biggest knocks on Bitcoin is how volatile it is, right? The price is all over the place. But this analysis flips that completely on its head. Instead of a weakness, they argue that volatility is actually its greatest strength. Those price swings aren't a bug, they're a feature. They're a mirror reflecting the actual chaos and uncertainty of the global system.
And this quote just says it all. The idea is that Bitcoin's price isn't just doing its own thing over here in a corner. It's a real-time scoreboard for what's happening in the world. As the superpowers fight and the narratives get spun, Bitcoin is just moving with the underlying truth of it all. And they give a real-world example of this in action. Remember that US-China trade war we were talking about? Well, when news broke that tensions were de-escalating, Bitcoin's price reacted immediately. According to this analysis, that's the truth machine doing its job, reflecting the real direction of events, not just the official story.
Okay, so accounting gimmicks, geopolitical chess. This is all big picture stuff. But why should you care? What does it actually mean for everyday people like you and me? Well, this is where it gets really important. The source argues that these high-level games have profound, real-world consequences for all of us.
The analysis has this really powerful term for it, forced speculation.
And here's the idea. When the money in your bank account is constantly losing its value, its purchasing power, then just saving it is a losing game. It forces everyone, it doesn't matter what you do for a living, it forces you to become a gambler with your own savings just to try and keep your wealth from evaporating. Your day job isn't enough. You also have to bet on the markets just to stay afloat.
And this isn't just a theory. Take a look at the data on this slide. It paints a pretty stark picture of a widening divide. Look at the trends. Over the last couple of decades, the slice of the economic pie going to people who own assets, like a home, and to people receiving entitlements, that shot way up. But then, look at that last line. The share of the economy going to the average worker from their wages, it's actually gone down.
This chart here shows the exact same thing, but visually. And wow, is it a stark picture? You can literally see two paths just diverging completely. The economic benefits flowing to asset owners and for entitlements are on this steep climb upwards. At the same time, worker wages are basically a flat line. The source has a pretty provocative name for this. They call it the boomer Ponzi.
So according to this analysis, the stakes really could not be higher. This quote frames the issue in these very clear black and white terms. Money isn't just about buying stuff, it's the very foundation of how society functions. If the money is sound, the world can work. If the money is broken, well, the world breaks right along with it.
And that leaves us with this final really deep question, which I think gets to the absolute heart of this whole analysis. If you think about it, money is supposed to represent our collective time and energy, right? It's what we trade our life's work for. So, if that's true, what does our current system, a system of printed narratives and forced speculation, really say about what we actually value as a society? Something to really think about.